Welcome to Cruising on the Edge. I'm Carol Cruz and I'm your host. And tonight's episode is going to be powerful, it is going to be personal, and it's going to be rooted in truth. I'm joined here by my white boyfriend, my friend, best friend. Oh, awesome. I'm so excited, as you can see. I'm also just getting over a cold, so sorry for the sinus issues. But yes, my good friend, advocate, and best-selling author and movement builder, now politician, getting into the politics. Yeah, okay. Yeah, getting back to your roots, okay, is Ryan Hampton. And Ryan and I go way back. We were like first met in person back at Mobilize Recovery 2018, 2019, right before the COVID hit. And we stood alongside with many people across the nation, right? Changers, movers, advocates, bestsellers, just people on
Shakers.
figure shaking it up. We're shaking it up, especially perfect place, Vegas. No,
Yeah.
in Vegas. All right. And we were just putting out narratives around addiction, treatment, and recovery, advocacy, movement, everything that you can think of. And tonight's episode, it's going to take us a little bit further into what Ryan's been doing and what we've been doing together as a nation, trying to still combat this opioid crisis, the fentanyl crisis, and so on and so forth. Nothing about us without us, activism, truth telling, and real solutions. And there's no one else that embodies this message than Ryan. Ryan is a national recognized recovery advocate, best-selling author, speaker, and one of the most influential voices in America's addiction and overdose crisis. In recovery from over a decade, from opioid addiction, Ryan has spent nearly 10 years mobilizing communities, shaping policies, and changing the stigma, prejudice, and systemic failures that keep people from getting help. He has helped launch the U.S. Surgeon General's first report on addiction, advised the White House and Congress, and has been featured on 60 Minutes, which I saw, NPR, the New York Times, I'm sorry, MSNBC, and more. As the founder of Mobilize Recovery, Ryan has trained more than 10,000 advocates and helped distribute over 950,000 doses of naloxone nationwide. His books, American Fix, Unsettled, and Fentanyl Nation, expose the truth behind the industry, corruption, legal injustice, and the pathway forward for real evidence based solutions. Ryan lives in Nevada with his husband, Sean, and their boxer, Quincy. And now he's taking the fight by running for Nevada's Democratic Assembly District 9. This conversation is about stigma, power, justice, and lived experience. So let's take it away, Ryan. Hey,
Amazing. I'm
hey.
so happy to be here. Oh, such a great way to wrap up the day, but also just to be able to spend some time with Cruz. I love it.
Cruzin, right? And with that, I got
That's
my name
right.
Cruzin from Miss K, and she was my
Yeah.
first person that I had on the podcast. And actually, I interviewed her in my hotel room there in Las Vegas. That first conference that we had, that
Mhm.
non-conference, as every
The unconference. Yeah.
conference, the un.
Yeah.
So let's dive right deeply into the personal Ryan and the whys and the
Mm.
evolution that you have created through your lived experience. Ryan, what is the moment you realized that advocacy was your life's work?
It's such a um, deep question to unpack. I think there's been multiple moments for me. I didn't, and I think there's been like multiple moments that have taken me in different avenues to try and like find my place in the world, if that makes sense. Like what I thought advocacy was in 2015 and 2016 versus like what I see it today are night and day, honestly. Um, I if I had to pinpoint one moment, I would say it was in living and sober living, um, spring of, well, end of winter, beginning of spring 2016. And a friend of mine, a roommate of mine, who died of an overdose in the house. And I, at the time, was driving Uber. I was one of the peer house managers. Um, I had not gotten vocal at all. I didn't know anything about anything other than sober living and Alcoholics Anonymous. That was it. That was like my world. Um, I didn't really foresee, much possibility in my life other than, where I was at the moment. But I think when my friend had passed away, um, I got angry and I kind of just fell into this work. It was really it wasn't it wasn't as much. It was I had lost friends at that point, several of them already, and it was as much his death as it was the response to his death from people and how he was treated and the circumstance was treated. It was, you know, put onto him that he died. And it was communicated to me and to my peers that it was his fault. And this is just kind of what happens. And I've told this story, different versions of this story, multiple times. Um, what led up to it, what happened after it. But really, in that moment, was he was seeking help at a hospital, that he had walked to that night. He was turned away at that hospital and told there was nothing that could be done for him. He wasn't seen by a doctor. He wasn't triaged. Uh, he had a nurse or a physician assistant that had given him some crisis hotlines he could call the next day. And he left that hospital in the early hours of the morning and, yes, made a conscious decision to use and died. Um, but it didn't have to be that way, right? And when we found out at the sober living, when we were told that this happened, it was presented as his fault. Like, this is just kind of what happens. And that was like a moment of real deep frustration and reflection on my part. Um, and I was angry and I didn't know what to do with that anger. And so the way that I processed was like many of us, right? Searching for answers and searching for others that felt the same way that I did. And that was really the beginning of, I think, finding my own footing initially as to what I could do to prevent another situation like what happened with Nick. Um, I will say though, like looking back now, 2025 going into 2026 versus 2016, the landscape's different, the people are different, um, the challenges that we face are different. My, understanding of movement building, my understanding of what's most important has changed. I really did feel like I was on an island at that point, and in many respects I was, because it didn't feel like, and I was living in Southern California at the time, it didn't feel like there were many people doing this work. But, now I see there are a lot of people who are doing it or want to do it. And I've learned along the way that you can't do anything by yourself. And I tried in the beginning. For me, it was, I'm going to do this come hell or high water, and I'm going to change this, and I'm going to like, I don't care what anybody says, like, this is what needs to happen. And I understand that that's not how change happens. It's just
Right.
not, you know? Um, and, and I've also learned that it's important to bring other people into the fold because while trying to do good, you don't want to do more harm, you know? And sometimes there's unintended harm that is caused when you look through things just through the lens of your own experience. It needs to be a collective experience of many. Um, so I think in that respect, like my view has changed, and certainly how I try to put, these principles ahead of the work that we do at Mobilize Recovery. And when I meet new people who are doing this work, and I see it a lot, and it's interesting because I've like, been studying movements in the last, particularly heavily of the last 5 years. And, this is not an uncommon story, right? Like you can look at the civil rights movement, you can look at the suffrage movement, you could look at the LGBT movement, and like there is an evolution of people in it, right? Where we all kind of end up at the same point at the end in terms of like this aha.
It brings us to that place of passion and purpose and
Yeah.
drives us. That is what the movement that I saw when I witnessed, and because you were the first platform, my first platform was with Greg Williams over the Anonymous People.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We started here in Connecticut. And I felt like I had had blinders on for such a long time because I came through the one way, 12-step programming and outpatient program, things like that, woman and child program. And I literally, it opened the whole scale of wow, there is so many change agents out here. We were calling them change agents then, right? And this movement that was it just lit me up like this what I'm doing right now, this
Yeah.
podcasting. This is just another step towards getting that information out there, getting people like yourself out there with your story. But thank you. Keep going.
Yeah, it's a journey, and it's one that like I'm grateful to be on every day. I still pinch myself, when I wake up in the morning. Um, that first and foremost like my own recovery and how I feel about myself these days, versus how I felt about myself, even 7 or 8 years ago, while I was in recovery, like I mean there's been a process of change, but I would say that like the best part of all of it, right, is yes, we have, I think, been able to make some incremental difference. We have been able to engage, and I use we because it's like all of us. We have been able to engage new people into this. There are people that I hope go on and do bigger and better things than me or Mobilize Recovery or anybody else has been able to do. But I think at the core of it, like it has connected, it has grounded me and connected me to people that I never in a million years would have thought would have been so important in my own life, right? Like it's given a purpose to why I'm here, on this planet. And sometimes I have to like get that granular and simple with it. It's just that connection because as you know, this work can be very frustrating sometimes. And sometimes you'll wake up and be like, why am I doing this? But it's the people that I get to work with and that I get to call friends today that I've met through this process that really makes this all worth the while. And also, every single one of them, I want to make this one point, and then we'll go. I know you have a whole book of
So we're
questions
not
probably to
taking all
ask,
the questions.
but I think that like it's really important for us to, and this has been important to me in my journey, particularly just in like the last 3 years, to recognize that every good person or good thing, I don't want to say bad person or bad thing, but other experience or other thing that's come into our life has come in, like there is something that we can take from it, right? And it is okay to sit in whatever that moment is and whatever that experience is and to like bless it and thank it for being a part of like who you are today, And every person that I've been able to come into contact with has taught me just as much as I hope I have offered to them. I would not be the person I am today, or the Advocate and Mobilize Recovery wouldn't be the organization it is if we didn't remain teachable and kind of stay like this, ever evolving sponge. Um, because we don't, and I don't know
Mhm,
everything,
mhm.
and it's impossible for any human to. And anybody who says they do know everything and they have the solution is full of shit, in my opinion,
Yeah. Yeah. And we realize how, we a lot of us were in siloed, we were siloed during, especially during COVID, and we're going to bring up some things around that in the work that you were doing in regards to Purdue Pharma.
Yeah.
And when I think of these, these little silos, and we see that in the treatment, we still see it in the treatment field. As I came in as a recovery coach, and in my days, I was extremely surprised. Yes, I feel like I was one of the lucky ones to be able to access the outpatient program for women and children, but it was the one and only in my area, in my district. There wasn't many of them, 30 years ago. There's quite a few that I can honestly say that part of my lived experience helped bring that grant dollars into fruition and brought those programs together. But you mentioned a lot of things about, you mentioned about your early recovery. So my next question is like, thinking back at your younger self when you were in active addiction, what do you wish that people really understood about you then?
Oh my gosh. Um, well, I'm going to answer that question and then I have a little short story to tell with it.
Good
There's a lot of things
storytellers.
I wish I
Come
would
on,
have
get your cup
understood.
of coffee, folks, or
Yeah, I
water.
wish I would have understood myself, right? Then. And I didn't understand myself in active addiction and in early recovery. I was in severe denial, in the closet mode about being gay for the majority of my life, right? The majority, like all of my young adult life, pretty much going into like my early 30s, and I, f- not that I feel, I know that did have a role in what transpired in my life in my 20s, right? And there was a significant amount of trauma, and particularly around sexual trauma as a youth, right? That a young person that I'd never talked about. And when I was able to let that go, right? When I was able to let that go in terms of being like coming out, being who I am, and I learned that the biggest fight that I was having was with myself in those days, right? Of course, it was a different time, right? Like in the 90s and the 2000s, it wasn't as popular or well accepted to come out as an LGBT, QIA plus person. But when I did, I was in a little bit more in a safe spot. If I had to like point to a moment where like things really started to change for me personally. I'm not talking about advocacy now. I'm just talking about like Ryan, right? Like the human Ryan. It was then. It was when I was like, you know what? This is who I am. And I'm not going to hide this anymore from anybody. And either then these were all things that I was like telling myself in the early days. It was like, if you're my friend, but now you're not my friend, that's okay.
Incredible
Because
saving, right?
yeah, like if you have a problem with this, that's your problem, not my problem. So that I wish people would have known that, Ryan, because I also feel like to if I could go back and live my life, like I think about it all the time. Like if I could go back to high school and
Mhm.
like live my life as like an openly proud LGBT person who people loved regardless of that of my identity, I'm not so sure like what would have happened going forward. You know what I mean? Like, and I know we can't turn back time, but like that is something that, sits heavy on me and also guides kind of what we do today. Like I'll say that like one of my big frustrations with what's going on in this current political environment we have right now is it's like we have this huge acknowledgement we've got a youth mental health crisis, right? We've got this huge acknowledgement that young people are dying of overdoses at a higher rate than the rest of the population. And then at the same breath, like we're not talking about how like the leaders of the free world are telling these kids they don't matter or exist, and we're strict. They want to take our health care. They want to take our marriages. They want to take our sense of identity and they want to, make us, they want to, they want me to be that Ryan who was like so afraid and scared and not think that we're going to have an adverse outcome from that. And it's like we're looking down the barrel of like suicides and substance use problems and domestic abuse and sex trafficking, and all these things are as a result of what these assholes are saying, that we don't matter. So now I'll go back to the quick story really quick. I was so afraid of, and this isn't a story I've shared too much, but I'm going to share here
When
on
it,
your podcast. You know, I was so afraid of letting people know that I was gay when I was writing American Fix. And I was writing American Fix. It came out in 2018. I was writing it in 2017. Garrett and I had, there it is. Garrett and I had just moved into an apartment, and I had just started writing the book. And I was Foster, who you know, and a dear friend of mine, non-binary trans person, she's the most beautiful person in the world. Foster was helping me with the
so
writing, and Foster and I were talking about. And Foster was saying, you know, Ryan, like you're like, if you're gonna write this, like you should be like, you know, this is something you might need to consider writing about. And I was like, oh, I can't, like, I can't. And Foster's like, well, let's just think about what it could sound like and get some ideas on paper. And so I wrote this piece about, very subtly, just like in I think it was like the third or fourth chapter, like talked about how hard it was being, you know, a gay man in Miami, right? And like the party culture there and being like in the closet. And it was like like a paragraph. And I wrote it and I put it in the book and I said, you know what? Let's do it. I'm going to put it in there. The best part about this is, though, is I don't have to think about it for another year, because it's like a year until this thing hits the bookshelves. So the book gets like into production, you know, they're getting printed, like publication. I had pushed this envelope like to the end. I was like terrified of telling people. And Garrett knew, like I had come out to Garrett like earlier, because I like that wasn't like, that was like coming out to your brother, you know. He was like, and he just like, you know, he was like, okay, fine, like whatever, and fuck anybody who has a problem with it, you know. And or I think he said something along, it's like, if somebody fucks with you or gives you shit, they're gonna have to deal with me, or something like, you know, something very endearing, like, or something like that.
to give you, he's gonna stand up for you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. He's like, I'll fight them, you know? And so it's like 2 weeks from publication day, and I'm freaked out because like all these guys from my sober living, all these people in like my recovery community, that like I had put on this front of being like this very like, you know, asexual but like straight person who just doesn't really, you know, mess with girls, and like it's just very focused on their, you know, ambitions and stuff, and every excuse in the world to not have a girlfriend. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to tell people, like, for people I have, like, you know, really good friends of mine. And so I decide I'm gonna do it in person. And I have the book with, like, I already had the preview copies of the book. And so I get in my car and I drive to a house where a bunch of them lived. And I was like, I made it this huge deal. I was like, I have to talk to you. Like, I just need a few minutes. And like, and they're like, okay, like whatever it is, like fine. And so they meet me outside the house, and I'm like, here's a copy. You get one of the first copies of the book, and I have to tell you like something that's in there. You're gonna read it, and like, you know, I want to tell you in person. I'm like, I'm gay, and they're like, okay, and I'm like, no, like you don't understand. Like I'm gay, and they're like, and my friend Jimmy like just laughed. He was like, he's like, you literally like set this whole thing up to tell us that, dude. Like we thought you were like something was really wrong, you know, like
Oh,
A, we all know and we don't care, you know what I mean? And it was just like I was just embraced with like so much love and acceptance and understanding, that I felt there was a part of me that like grieved the younger Ryan, because I wish I would have had that same experience, you know? But it has been the most like being able to be that person and being able to like fall in love with Sean, and like being able to like have an open marriage, and being able to like, you know, I put something on Facebook yesterday, like talking about like equality, like no exceptions, and like standing up for my friends like Foster, who are like, some my trans friends who are afraid to get on planes these days, and like watching these, you know, kids, you know, who are like so incredible and full of promise and talent, and like, you know, I see as like the next generation of like movement builders being told they don't matter. And like, I feel like that is as much as my calling as like standing up for recovery. And in fact, I don't believe I can say that I'm standing up for recovery unless I'm standing up for them too.
Right. Oh my God, everything that you just said is beautiful, and it's interesting that I highlighted a part in your book, and I'm going to read a little bit of it
Mhm.
real quick. It's in the first chapter. Um, did my sexuality identify predispose this identity as predispose me to addiction? I don't think so, but I do believe that we are all only as sick as our secrets.
Mhm.
Just going to jump down to the bottom because this is where I identify as a person of color, but unfortunately, I couldn't hide who I was.
Right. Yep.
So every time people wouldn't come towards me, it was because you don't want to be around a person of color.
Right.
The anxiety and the depression that went along with growing into my sexual orientation did present vulnerability to addiction. The LGBTQ plus people experience addiction much higher rates than non-LGBTQ plus people. Along where we're likely to seek help from our problems with drugs and alcohol. And then just let's last part that I wanted to read. After all, it's not what happened to you, it's how we deal with it.
And on that point, and I know I'm going like my ADD brain's taking us like on a sharp right turn here, but we're gonna do it.
Free.
I,
Let's do
I want to say like part of my frustration and like and what it were not, and it's not just like I know like what's coming down with the Trump administration and what MAGA extremists are trying to do and like, but this is a problem that way predates like Donald Trump. Like it was happening. I mean, when I went to treatment, Obama was president, right? And like I the lack of specialty, and the word we'll use, right, Carol, is culturally competent care for the LGBTQIA plus community is mind-boggling. Now, and let me, I will, and people will say, yeah, but like treatment is treatment, right? Like addiction treatment is addiction treatment. No, it's not. Like when I was thrown into an addiction treatment facility multiple times where I was very at my most vulnerable, had been harmed, and I finally felt. I remember one time in the late 2000s, I think it was like 2009. I remember like this feeling of relief the first day I walked into treatment. I can remember putting my head down on the bed at the detox, being like, I'm safe and like I can do this. And like I had gotten dosed with like methadone, and I was like, I'm Ryan's gonna do this. And I remember talking and like making friends and bonds with people as we do. And it was a all male unit that I was in. And then immediately feeling like this outcast when everybody the culture of the center was like girlfriend this fucking this like what tell me about this experience or that experience and spitballing all this stuff, and I immediately found myself like engulfed once again in having to like lie about who I am just to
identity.
survive and feel like I was a part of, and not, and then completely shut down to be able to even talk to a therapist about it. Like and the question never even came up. It was always like, so tell me about your home life. Tell me about your girlfriend. Do you have a wife? And like I'm like, "Oh, like okay, like yeah, I do have a girl." Like I mean, it was just like, so not that it did more harm, but it certainly didn't help. And I didn't leave treatment a free person inside. When I was able to like let go of that and be who I am, like, you know,
Mhm.
that was the difference for me.